get a quorum, I'll just do an update. We can't vote on anything.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we already have one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right?
How many
Myself,
do you
Joe.
need for the
Yeah.
quorum?
Yep, we only
Good.
need 4. Yep,
All
so
right.
we've got a quorum.
And
I'll give her 1 minute. But we go live now.
yeah, you're live, but you guys can start whenever you want.
Okay.
This conference will now be recorded.
I'll let you guys start it whenever you're ready. Have fun.
All right. Thanks. I was going to give Crystal 1 more minute, but I'll just let her join. All
There
right,
she
we'll
is.
go ahead. Yep. Yeah, we'll give her 1 minute. All right. Crystal, can you hear us?
I can.
Excellent. Great. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started then. All right, we'll go ahead and welcome to the April 7th, 2020 meeting of the East Bridgewater Finance Committee. Just a reminder to everyone that this is an online meeting as we keep our distance from each other. And it is being recorded live and also will be available for review on EBCAM's website at a later date. So as I mentioned, we have Dave Walsh and Dan Picha not able to join us tonight, but we have them. We're actually going to have, this is going to probably be a fairly short meeting. Brian and I have been talking, and with a few more things that are outstanding, we probably were not going to do our voting tonight. Still a few things that are fluid. We thought we'd just kind of update everybody where we are, discuss a few items that we had kind of some questions on that were pending from last week, and then kind of plan forward for when we're going to try and wrap everything up. So the first item, so I sent everybody out our agenda and a few other documents. So the first item we want to do is just a quick update on where we are with the budget. I'm not even going to bring the budget sheet up because Brian and I keep mucking around with it. But one of the things that happened is that we actually got the Southeastern Regional final number has come in. I sent everybody a copy of the presentation, of the budget presentation, and I think I was pretty shocked, and I'm sure Brian was too, that the increase was a pretty substantial increase, much more than what we thought it would be. I think it was about, correct me if I'm wrong, about a 14.5% increase over last year.
Yeah. Yes.
So
Yep.
pretty substantial. I think Brian had estimated, we thought we were seeing a little bit more than a 10%. So unfortunately, that created an additional $52,000 in expense of deficit that we need to cover. So we're discussing kind of our thoughts around how to close that new gap that we now have. And we still have some questions pending, specifically around what that we're in getting the answers on now. So a couple of our thought process is, you know, a couple areas that we can look at to close this new gap. Obviously, our reserve account is probably the first place we would look, and I think we could probably take, you know, look at that for some of it. But Brian and I also talked that 2 of the areas that we added to the selectmen's budget, the special projects and the intern line items, we probably should take a look at utilizing that as well. So I think we'll probably, and then, you know, we still have a little flexibility in play. If we needed to, we could look at snow and ice, because we did bring snow and ice back up to fund it, increase that funding to 150. So we have a couple areas we can still look at. But I think between the 2 line items in the selectmen's budget and our reserve, we'll probably be fine in those line items. Any questions on that specifically?
Brian,
I know I got to the materials late, but sorry, I'm sorry.
Brian, my experience with the Blue Hills Regional was that if enough member towns rather disapprove of the budget, that they would have to go back and redo it. Does that work the same way in SER? And if so, is there any appetite for that you are aware of?
Yes, it does work the same way, but no, there is no appetite. I checked with other town administrators, but the formula is based upon a Department of Education formula that measures equalized value between communities, but also the number of kids we're sending to the school. So we're sending 2 additional kids to school over what we did last year,
Yeah.
plus their number went up a nominal. I mean, they're still at net school spending, so you can't criticize them in terms of, their total budget, but it's because we're sending more kids, we're paying more money.
Gotcha.
I really tore apart the numbers, and I sent the numbers over to John and Liz to make sure that I was reading them correctly, and I can't complain about them. I'd love to, but I can't.
Hi, Harper.
You're saying hi to you now. Can you say hi? You want to wave real quick?
Hi, Harper. Good. Hey, the joys of working from home, right? You get to
Oh,
see all the
yeah.
smiling faces.
At least she wasn't crying.
So that's pretty much where we are with the budget gap filling that. I think, like I said, I think we have some flexibility with a couple of line items to kind of fill that. So I'm not, again, we're hoping that we don't anticipate any other surprises, although given the state we're in right now, it's liable to happen. But I think once we kind of get a few of the line items cleaned up, I had some discussions with John Hainstay. We had a few outstanding questions on his budget, and I was trying to help Dan out because Dan's been out straight. I probably created a few more questions off of that, but I think we'll have those pretty much wrapped up. We have a few questions on a line item, specifically in the water budget, but we're gonna get those ironed out. And so I'm not sure there'll be any changes, but we'll have just some clarification on them. So I think by our next meeting, we probably will be fine with the budget, and I'm thinking hopefully be able to just kind of vote it as done. So that's that. Were there any other questions from the committee on any other line items in the budget? Nope. Great. Okay. And then what I wanted to do is we're not even going to vote through the rest of the warrant. I sent over an updated warrant that Brian sent me. And there are a couple areas that I wanted to just have a quick discussion on, and I wanted to ask Brian to kind of walk through some of the changes and updates that have happened in the last week. So, Brian, do you want to start with Article 1 on
Sure.
the
Article 1, I'm going to increase the request on the money there because with the COVID issue, we have several employees that have not been able to take scheduled vacation time, both DPW, police and fire, most particularly water. So consequently, we're probably going to get hit with some requests to purchase back excess vacation time. And I do need to work with the Board of Selectmen to develop a policy about that because it's an exception to the collective bargaining agreements involved, and it's an exception to the personnel policy. So that is the province of the Board of Selectmen, and I want to make sure that I include them in the decision making. But I'm going to have to create a little more money in the budget or in the warrant to create a place I can take the funds if I need to buy out the vacations. So I've upped the request on Article 1 to 200,000.
With that 150
How much of
before
an
that.
increase is that?
I added an extra
50, I think.
50, I think.
50,000. Thank you. I asked an extra 50 grand.
Okay,
Any questions on that article? So we had already voted that article, so we'll have to basically revote it next time around, if that gets finalized. So I've just put a note on that. The next article, we wanted to have just a quick conversation on. You'll see in the updated warrant that we sent out, Brian refined the language around the snow and ice, I believe Article 2, I believe it is, on snow and ice. He and I then had some conversation because it was a little confusing based on some old names of accounts that it's getting spread out on. So Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're going to change the verbiage of the article again to kind of take out the specific account numbers and just say to the appropriate account numbers.
The appropriate account numbers as determined by the town accountant. That solves the problem.
Yeah, so and just so you guys know, because you'll see it, one of the line items is vehicle rental, which confused me. And the problem is that, yes, we do actually rent a vehicle for the snow season, but the majority of the funds in that line item are actually the contractors that we hire for the whole snow removal season. It's just one of those history things where everything kind of always went to that account number and it never got changed and the title never got changed. So it's I think it's a little misleading. So we're going to
Sorry, what
work
This,
again.
what article is this? Sorry.
The snow and ice.
Article 2 in the special.
Yeah, two.
Oh, and special, okay.
So two things will happen. Brian's going to reword the article. But then behind the scenes, we're also going to work to have those expenses broken out of that one line item and have it done, broken out appropriately. But that's kind of here and there. Just so we know that there'll be some changing, nothing changes in the dollar amount. And I believe we already did vote that through. It'll just be rewording of removing the account numbers. Any questions on that one? Okay.
No,
The next one, I didn't write down the article
Sped.
number. But it's the SPED revolving fund. So what I've asked, so if you can remember from last week, I actually asked to skip over this so we could have a little bit more discussion. So we did not vote this last week. And what I'd like to do is I'd like Brian to kind of explain it to everybody. So just from a history perspective, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, Christopher,
Okay.
years ago.
So in 2016, the state allowed towns to establish a special reserve fund for special education. I call it surprise expenses. This allowed you to put aside money in the budget, in the warrant, that can span multiple years and create a buffer so that the school department did not have to over budget in special education expenses in the anticipation of a surprise. So in order for them to take money from this account, it requires the permission of two boards. I believe it's the Board of Selectmen and the school committee, and you can also throw the stipulation is that to advise the finance committee so you're aware of what's going on. And then they can pay a surprise special education expense. This was established last year and funded at $6,300. For those of you who have involvement in SPED, you would know that $6,300 doesn't go very far in special education. That one student alone could trip over $60,000 or $70,000 in special education expenses. And what we're trying to provide for the schools is a way and manner in which they do not have to inflate the budget and prepare for a surprise. So we are actually creating the safety net for them. Now, this money, think of it as stabilization, if you will, for special education, resides in the town's trust funds or invested funds and can only be drafted out by a vote of two committees for special education. It is not under the control of the school administration per se. It is only for the use of a surprise in special education. So if you say, okay, Brian, what if we don't give it 200,000? What if we give it only 100,000? Okay, well, the extra 100,000 would go in stabilization where it would be available for appropriation by town meeting, even under the same experience. So in other words, if the school had a surprise special education cost that they could not handle, they would have the privilege or right to petition town meeting to release that fund. Problem is that we only do a town meeting by design in May, and very infrequently are we calling special town meetings. So we would have a problem in funding that until we had a town meeting. This provides the source of funds that would be available should we receive a surprise in special education. But the most important thing, this is not putting more money into the school's budget. This is making money available should we have a surprise. So we have the finance committee's reserve account. Think of this as special education's reserve account.
So that would be my question, Brian. Why wouldn't we just use the present reserve account and do all that stuff?
Because a couple of hits for special education would wipe you out.
Well, then we put more. I mean, a couple of hits will
Can't put
wipe
more
out
till you get a
whatever
special
account you
town
have.
meeting. You
What?
can't put it in until you have a special town meeting.
You can't what?
You cannot
hear you.
replenish the reserve account until you have a special town meeting. And if I was having
Okay.
a special town meeting, I'd vote the money out of stabilization and not out of reserve. So I don't want to have to call a special town meeting because I have a special education child that needs to be taken care of. Just, that's not cost effective. By the way, this is most important to be understood that we're not spending this money, we're reserving this money.
Right, it's a reserve fund. I'm just questioning, like, why, how many reserve funds do we need in the town? Why can't we just have one and,
Yeah,
share?
rather than having one for special ed, could finance for like finance committees just be the 200 it is plus the 163,000? I think that's just what he's saying.
So
It's just
one,
paperwork.
one,
that's it.
so one thing to note, we already voted and approved the reserve, the account. So either
Mhm.
last year or the year before. So we voted that we agreed to have the account. It now comes down to funding the account.
Mhm.
So again, so the account already exists and we all agreed that the account was warranted.
Mhm.
Now it comes down to actually, funding and putting money in the account. And again, go ahead.
The difference between the two accounts is if we put this into the reserve fund for special education, it spans multiple budget years. If you put it only into the finance committee reserve account, it only funds the 1 year. And then we're taking the money out of free cash to build this account. So I'd be moving free cash into the operating budget for the reserve account, where in this particular case, I'm moving money from free cash into an article that spans multiple budget years.
Plus
So
you
what-
have a different mechanism for its retrieval.
Disbursement.
Correct. It needs a full vote of the school committee and a full vote of the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
But not taken out lightly or easily. And by the
Yeah,
way, once appropriated, it doesn't go into the school's budget. It gets to use to pay that bill.
Right, so what happens if you get no surprises, like over 10 years, and then it's got like $2 million in it? What can you do with that money?
Okay, so well, first you could close the article, so you can push the money back into free cash. That's the technical answer. Joe, I
Okay.
can promise you, you will never make it 10 years without drawing on this account.
Okay,
I promise you. The question is, can we build it to a point that we don't have to draw on it? And, and not draw on it every year. But from my history with special education, we've had to pull money from all different sources to cover special education every year. And no matter how conservative you budget or how liberal you pad that budget, you can never project properly special education expenses.
really? So why bother, I guess, right?
Well, that's why I'm creating the fund of money so we can take care of the surprise.
Mm.
Now, I'm trying to dig through my last couple years of warrants because I still had the question. And Crystal, I don't know if you have any memory of this. For some reason, I had it stuck in my head that I thought the finance committee also was an approver of that. But
I will double check on that. I can't remember in the law. It's actually by statute. Who
It
gets
is,
to
okay.
approve.
I think there was intention that finance committee should have some kind of at least opinion on the matter, so.
I'm sure the Board of Selectmen would include you in any action that they took.
So originally, we had been talking about it being $100,000 funding, and then we've now since been talking about $200,000 funding. And again, you know, to Brian's point, the money sits in one spot or it sits in the other, but it gets used exactly the same way and under the same exact controls. But I wanted to hear a little bit, and I'm sorry Dan's not on because I know Dan has a very strong opinion on this too. I wanted to hear a little bit about how the committee felt about it.
Well, what if you made it 150 and took the 50 to cover the overage on the other side there with the Southeastern Regional?
Can't. Single source of funds, multiple source of funds.
Huh?
Remember, we're gonna match. We're gonna take ongoing revenue, match it against ongoing expenses. We're gonna take
Yeah.
one-time source of revenue against one-time expenses.
Okay.
I think if we have the money, I think this is a good place to put it. Like you said, this is, you know, 1 or 2 students for 1 or 2 years that could move into East Bridgewater tomorrow. So if the money's available, I don't think this is a bad place to put it. I think it's a good idea.
I think, you know, I don't disagree as well. I think, you know, I have this little niggle in the back, but I think with appropriate, you know,
Oversight.
budgeting and oversight. And again, I'd look to you guys, Crystal and Melanie, as the liaisons to really, you know, if we're now funding this for the surprises, we want to make sure that the sped line in the operating budget is as accurate as it can be.
I know when we talk to them, those are the lines they focus on the most. Like I think they spend the majority, I mean, that's where, those are their biggest lines and most of it. So I think they spend a lot of time working with those numbers, and they can't foresee everything, obviously, but I think they do their best to stay on top of what they can with it. And like I said, that's just usually what, when we're meeting, those are usually the line items that they're talking about the most.
And they do, and like to your point, they focus on them a lot in their own meetings as well, too.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I think it'll just be come down to us making sure that we understand it 1,000% and are watching, you know, and helping to be part of the conversation. Okay.
and I think, I know when we meet with them, we question them because they're the biggest line items. And I think going forward, if we know that money's there, it gives us all the more reason to even question those line items more in their operating budget to make sure that, you know, they're not trying to change their operating budget so they can use this money or anything.
Exactly.
There's definitely ways we can try to mitigate the concerns.
Crystal, how do you feel about it?
I think we can, if we have it, we should put it there. It's kind of clear, like just looking at the transportation as one thing this year and how it affects everything. So just the whole sped funding has always kind of been, that's like their one issue every year. So that was kind of the point of this being established. So yeah, I agree. If there's, as long as there's oversight and then, you know, good faith, then I think that's the point of it is good. So I don't disagree with putting money in there.
I think
Okay.
there's like, and not just East Bridgewater, but there's concern of in the next couple of years, like a real growing number of special education needs due to like a couple factors, but not just East Bridgewater, but you know, this whole area. So might be good to have.
Good. Okay. Kevin, Joe, anything else? Are you guys too good? Are you good?
Sounds
No,
good.
I mean, I think that, as was said, I think that if it's there, I think it's an okay place to put it. And I think Melanie's point is very, very well taken as far as the oversight piece of it is concerned. And, you know, just making sure that it doesn't, you know, that there's no other play with numbers with the knowledge that that money is in fact there. So, yeah.
All right, and we can go back and look at the statute and stuff too, and then we can request, you know, if the finance committee does not have a formal involvement, I think we could certainly make a request of the town administrator and selectmen, you know, to make sure that the finance committee is actively involved in the discussion. And we can do it that way.
I think when we brought this up a few years ago, I believe that we did talk to the finance committee at the time. You know, and they did have their input at that point. But, and again, I'm not too sure about the statute. I think we did that because the process, we needed that involvement, but I'm not too sure it's required by statute, but Brian will check that out.
Okay, great. All right, the next one we wanted to just do some clarification on was on the fire department's ladder truck. So Brian, do you want to just give a quick update on the numbers and the discussions this week?
Meeting with Tim, and we're looking through the warrant and covering things with department heads on their budgets. I have not put in the correct number for the ladder truck. The purchase of the ladder truck, if we buy it in the special town meeting, would be 1.187. If we buy it in the annual, it's 1.248. Depends upon when we can pay for it and whether we can buy the one that's already ready to go. But his request also included money for outfitting the truck and training on the truck. So that pushes the request to 1.4. And it was in his original email, and I concentrated solely on the purchase of the truck. So he's right. He asked for it and I ignored it. So now I'm having to adjust that number.
Is that 1.4 either way, whether it's on the special or annual?
Yes, it is.
Why would it be the same?
Yeah,
Why
why
would it be the same price?
He put it at the same price because it's really not that long of money difference. And if he can return money at the end of the article, great. That means he can pay back the reserve fund faster. So if there's money not spent at the end of the purchase, that money goes right back into the capital stabilization account.
Is there a benefit trying to get it pushed through special of having a lower price listed?
Yes. Oh, I see your point.
Yeah,
Yeah, actually, I'll tell you what, I'll make the motion different for each one of those articles. And that would make the number difference.
yeah, because I think if people think they're getting a savings,
They're
we
more
could-
inclined to vote for it in the special. All right, I
exactly.
think that's a very good suggestion.
Okay. All right.
Not quite sure how I do this at the end of the book when we have the sources for funds, when we've got two different numbers for the same purchase. So if I'm
Right,
not
yeah.
careful, it's gonna look like we're buying two trucks.
That would cause an
You could
uproar.
probably. It would.
Yeah.
All right. And then the last item on the articles was just an update on capital, which I would have asked Dan, but Brian, you were there as well. I think you guys were fine. I think capital approved everything last Wednesday night.
Capital approved everything, well, not everything, I should say, be careful.
Everything they were going to.
Everything they were going to, that's a good way to say it. They knocked off the town hall sign for $30,000. And they removed the street sweeper. I'll come back to that in a minute. And they removed the school radios. That was about $4,600. And they removed the carpet in the STEM lab at the middle school. And they voted to move the rest of the articles forward. That would include, just for your remembrance, town hall renovations, the air conditioning in the police station, the central school sewer connection, the tasers, the police cruisers, the smart boards, the Chromebooks, the auditorium lighting, the video processor, switches and UPS devices for the school, and the video surveillance project have all been approved. The street sweeper, and I think this is actually a good sign. A lot of discussion between capital budget and John, and the idea is to finance the street sweeper with our chapter 90 money. which means it's grant money. So it's not going to show up in the warrant itself. So that will be taken care of by using the grant money and then paid out over 3 or 5 years, depending upon what we end up with for Chapter 90 money and for the cost of the sweeper in the ultimate. So that is coming off the warrant because it doesn't have to be voted by town meeting. And they rejected the STEM lab carpet because it really belongs to facilities and not in the capital budget. And in addition, it's not bondable. So that didn't meet the definition of capital. And the school radios, they thought that $4,600 didn't meet the threshold of capital, that they pushed it back to the school with, you should find the money in your own budget. So that's where they are. Questions?
Any questions on the capital items? No? Good, great. All right, well, that was what we had for run through on the articles thus far. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if we have another tweak or two before we're done, but we'll certainly have detail on any of that before we do votes. The only last thing before we look at minutes real quick is, again, nothing to be doing now, but obviously every week that goes by that we're in this wonky crisis time, we're, constantly thinking about the budget and how it's going to potentially affect the budget and everything we're doing. So again, there's no indication and no definitives yet about what might happen, but we want to just kind of be, Brian's already got, plan A, B, C, D started in his head, and it's something for us to be kind of thinking about too. Should something bad happen and we do end up with, cut state aid or whatever, we need to probably, just be rattling that around in the back of our heads too, from a planning perspective.
Dave
obviously
Sheedy and I
more
went
on
through, Dave Sheedy and I went through several iterations of what ifs today. And I think we've got some ideas of how we would resolve any shortfall in funding, either a cut in local aid or a cut in local receipts. Right at the moment, I guess the best way to describe it is I could only deal with what we know and move forward. The first plan would be, assuming that we can have a town meeting sometime in the near future, that we would approve the operating budget and the capital items, but immediately not issue purchase orders. And Dave and I identified about $2.2 million that we would freeze until we could figure out where the economy was going to take us and what changes would occur to our local numbers. So I think we have a plan, and we've got several iterations of that plan, depending upon which way the economy goes when we come out of this. But right at the moment, let's talk about the essential services of the town. Would you cut schools, police, fire? No. So that takes out about 82% of the budget right there. So we have to start thinking about what would be expendable. And I would have to tell you that your predecessors on the finance committee did an awfully wonderful job of making sure that we run efficiently but lean. So cuts would be difficult, but maybe the cuts would come at the cost of our capital items, and we would recirculate that money into the operating budget to get us over the hump. The direct answer to the question is I think the economy will come back. The question is how fast and how evenly or unevenly.
Yep. Agreed. Good. Good. Well, that finishes up our discussions on the articles and the budget. Is there anything on anybody's mind before we potentially look at minutes that they wanted to discuss tonight on either? No? Okay. Did anybody, I know I sent them out very last minute. I apologize because I got totally distracted. Did anybody have a chance to read the minutes, or do we want to punt them until the next meeting? Because they were they were thoroughly long
There's a lot
minutes.
in there.
I'm pretty
I'm
impressed
fine
that
if
you
we
only had
want-
2 pages, though. It's only 2 pages.
Really? I thought it was more.
Is there more? Oh, maybe. Oh,
No, it's 4. Yeah, it's 4 pages.
all right. Well,
Clearly,
Crystal only
clearly,
clearly
Melanie,
read two.
you don't have the gift that Laura
I
has.
didn't read
for
'em.
condensing Things.
Yeah.
No, mine would have been 6.
Yeah.
No, this would have been a half a page.
No, that was just my recent ones. A year ago when I did this, much longer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
why don't
where
we
I
do
learned
this? Yeah, I know. Why don't we go ahead, we'll punt this set of minutes because I think they are pretty substantial and they probably need a little bit fine tooth comb for everybody to go through a little bit. So
Yeah,
I'm fine
please do.
punting them. Okay.
okay.
Yeah, so if everybody could kind of take a read through them, there's a lot in there. Just trying to do a quick review and see if anything pops up that needs to be edited. And other than that, we're through. We need to schedule we haven't talked about next meetings. Brian, how on task do you want to keep us to scheduling?
You want to try next Tuesday evening again?
Yep, I think that's fine.
I think we are coming down to a point where we can take some final votes and hopefully I'll straighten out the remaining questions that you and I had today and
Yep.
we can actually deal this job up.
Yes, I agree. Okay. Is everybody good for 6 o'clock again next Tuesday?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Sounds good.
Excellent.
The 14th.
All right. So
Yeah.
that'll be April 4th. Same deal, go to meeting. Excellent. And then hopefully I'll be a little more proactive and get the email out a little earlier this time with the documents. I apologize.
Please
But
do.
great. I know, I'm so busy. You know, I got this back. Right now, it's one of those something shiny moments. Which project am I going to start and not finish is what it is. Good. All right. Well, any other last questions? If not, oh, yep, Brian. Brian's getting ready to go out into the world.
Oh, good
I wore
luck.
mine today. I wore mine into CVS.
I had to run
Yeah,
in a
good.
Target and I had mine on.
Good.
I'm amazed how many
Mask up.
people actually are wearing them. I'm pleased.
I was in
Good
CVS
thing,
about
yeah.
half, about 50%.
Yeah,
That's what
Like
I
to
was
see a
saying,
lot.
probably.
Yeah. But great. All right. What I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Excellent. Any other discussion? Other than that, all in favor? I can see all your faces, so you can just do aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye. Excellent.
I'll go
All
yes
right.
this week.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yep.
have a good night, everyone, and we'll talk to you
Thank
next
you.
week. All right.
Thanks. Good night.
This conference